Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, and in deference to our guests, let's see, it must be noon there in Central Time, right, in
Right
Texas.
on the dot. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Straight up. So our purpose for being here each week is to talk about all matters related to your profession, starting and running a business, generating wealth. Someone's always calling in right when the show starts. You can pretty much count on it. So, and all of those various issues. So, for those of you who are already regular viewers of the show, you hopefully remember Aaron Holtzman. Aaron was on, I think about a month and a half ago or something like that. And he talked about his journey through accounting and eventually starting his own firm with a partner and moving to Austin, Texas. And toward the end of the conversation, we started talking a little bit about the challenges that this poses when you're married. Because I was 26 when I started my first business. Marriage was not even in sight. I think the only person who cared what I did was my cat, and she certainly, like most cats, acted like she didn't care. So as long as she got her tuna tax, she was good to go. But it's different when you're a little bit farther along in life, and I really want Aaron described Kelsey in such glowing terms. So,
now you guys can see for yourselves.
Yeah, right. And I'm guessing she didn't pay him to do that. So, no, yeah, I think she's saying no. So I thought, this was an opportunity not to miss, to talk to people who have successfully navigated this path. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Kelsey and Aaron Holtzman, live from Austin, Texas. And so for those of you who want to know about Aaron's, the details of Aaron's background, you can go to our YouTube channel and see that show. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, Kelsey, is tell us a little bit about your professional background, kind of where you were at, so people can get a sense of, these two people coming together from what I understand from, somewhat different worlds.
Yeah, wildly different worlds in some ways. So I have an arts background. I was born and raised in Texas, but moved to the East Coast for college. I went to undergraduate school in Massachusetts, and then moved to New York afterwards to pursue acting. So I have a degree in communications, but have always been really passionate about performing. And so it became clear that was kind of a path I had to pursue and see where it took me. So I went to grad school and got a graduate degree in acting in Manhattan. So I was there pursuing my acting degree, and then kind of seeing what it meant to be a professional actor. And as I anticipated, there was a lot of inconsistency and a lot of kind of ups and downs. So auditioning and doing that whole thing, a very different world than where Aaron comes from. And at the same time, trying to build out a career in something that would be more substantial and more reliable if I decided to kind of veer away from the acting world, not for a lack of loving it, but just wanting to have, to feel more rooted. And that was a big piece of advice that actually my father has always instilled in me, always very supportive of this path, but also really encouraging me to figure out what else I could kind of build out on the side. And so I was working with nonprofits in the New York area.
So if I can, I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment. But before you go on to that, I'd like to focus a little bit more on your acting and where that came from, because I think a lot of people can relate to this. Certainly I started doing shows, literally as I think I was, 4 or 5 years old. My two sisters and I would do shows for the family. We'd stand in the living room and sing or whatever. And despite being painfully shy, I always loved performing and, did theater all through junior high school. And in fact, when my high school, friends found out I was not going into acting, they were shocked. They just assumed that this is what I was going to do. And my pat reply was, yeah, I don't really want to starve for a living. I was up against people. If you know Anthony Edwards, he was always Tony to me, the guy who played Goose on Top Gun, right? So Tony he's a year younger than I am, and very, really talented guy, right? And I'm looking at that, I'm going, yeah, I'm not that, right? So what gave you, if this is the right word, well, first of all, where did the passion come from? And what gave you the courage to pursue that passion?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I think the passion came from similarly always feeling most comfortable when I was kind of performing in that way, whether it was singing for my parents, and I'm not a singer. I did not pursue musical theater, but singing my favorite, show tunes in my room for my parents, or kind of like performing with Barbies and making scenes with my sisters. So that always felt like just like a safe, comfortable space for me. I also have 2 older sisters who are 9 and 12 years older, and the one in the middle who's 9 years older. So they kind of were forming a path and forging ahead when I was still very young. So I was really watching them always. And the one in the middle did just that. She was brave enough to go to New York and study acting for her undergraduate degree, and then eventually moved to California to pursue TV and film. So that option was already there because I saw, my sister pursue it. And I saw how my parents supported her through it and encouraged her to do it, and kind of really, believed in her dreams. So that it always felt like it wouldn't be off the table if that was something that I actually wanted to do. And then as I got older, especially in high school, similarly, kind of, when you start trying to find your place and what it is you really care about, I remembered, my sister was always doing theater. It always seemed so fun. I did plays here and there when I was younger. And so I joined the theater group in high school, and just it opened up a whole new world for me. And it was really where I found my people, where I felt most comfortable, and performing felt like a passion that I had never experienced before. And I carried that with me through college. But similarly, I think there was a running theme of like, I love this so much, but it's not something you realistically do unless, you're Goose from Top Gun, or it's not a realistic path. So I'll just continue to find ways to do it. But that's where I spent most of my time and energy. And the same thing happened in grad school. I'm sorry, in college, where I was pursuing a different path, and my major was communications, and I was trying to do what you're supposed to do, but I still spent a lot of time and energy and most of my focus as part of the theater troupe and playing these big meaty roles in college. Like, I was the lead in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which means nothing in college, but it was such an amazing experience. And I just really caught that bug. And so as I was, ending my time in college and figuring out what was next, I had many conversations with my parents and my sister, and thought about it a lot. And she really gave me all of the reasons not to do it, having pursued it herself. And I was very grateful for that realism and for the truth, because I think it's important to hear it. But I still feel like it was something I needed to do, even though, and I can share more, but I'm kind of on a different path now. I am so grateful that I had that support, and that I went into it, with open eyes and knew what I was doing. And so I applied to grad schools and felt like if I get in, this is happening.
Right.
And so I went to the New School for Drama in New York, and that experience alone was kind of confirming that I was just able to be that serious about a passion, and learn from some of the best and most committed working actors out there, and be a part of a troupe that way, and be in Manhattan that way. And again, it's a lot of privilege comes with it. I was able to do it because I had a lot of support, emotionally and even financially to a degree. And so I was able to do that, and then was able to pursue it professionally for a period of time, which was just really special. And the auditioning and working in restaurants and kind of that grind gave me a perspective that I think still plays a factor in a lot of what I do today. And I was able to be part of a ongoing off-Broadway production called Drunk Shakespeare, which is now in many states, so they've done well, and that was an incredible experience. And that's when I met Aaron during that time. So
Okay.
I was, full throttle, kind of really pursuing theater, but also trying to kind of build out a path in the nonprofit education world. But yeah, that's where that all came from, and how it kind of led me to
Right. So
go for
one
it.
other question in this realm, and that is, you alluded to, I think, how the profession of acting is very, very different than what we think it is back in high school and
Sure.
even college, right? I know the most talented actor at my high school, I don't want to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him. So he was so talented. He was flown out to Broadway to audition to lead a show,
Incredible.
was given the role,
Yeah.
show opened, and it closed after like 3 performances.
Yeah.
And it just crushed him.
Yeah.
And he came back to we grew up in Santa Barbara, California, about an hour north of LA. He came, and he never pursued professional acting again. It was such a tremendous blow. And he's a terrific guy, but I mean, the reality of it versus, I mean, he was virtually a god to us in high school, in terms of his ability. He was so, and he was a nice guy. He wasn't, you know what I'm saying? So talk to us, if you would.
Yeah.
What was that kind of coming to reality moment, and how did that impact you?
Yeah. It's so true. And anyone who's kind of gone a path that is not maybe like, no path is foolproof, but a path that is just notoriously very fickle, and also very reliant on things like luck and timing and outside factors that you cannot control, can attest to sort of, I think you many times most people go into it knowing, this is going to be hard, but the passion overrides that. And so I never felt like I got to make it, I got to be on Broadway, or I got to be in films or on TV. But of course that's the ultimate goal. And so I think for a long time it felt like I'm going to push through it and pursue it as much as I can for as long as I can. And again, I think differently than some of my peers in grad school, I also was looking at ways to have that kind of other path that I could go down in the event that I did make that call, which I eventually did. Where, you know, a lot of my friends who are still doing it today and successful today were, you know, that's their 24/7. They are, you know, they have other forms of income and are working where needed, but that, like, they eat, sleep, and breathe this, and they continue to push through it regardless of representation and managers and agents and you know, booking something and then it closes, or all those things that you can't control. And so I differently, while I was kind of pursuing it full steam ahead, I was also spending time working with nonprofits and building out that kind of leg of my career, because I think I knew that deep down there was a desire for a life that I have now. That if you know, if the luck and the work and the passion and the timing didn't all play out, I knew that eventually it wouldn't be sustainable to be, you know, auditioning all the time and doing shows in the evenings, and, you know, also working. And it just, at some point, it was going to come to a head. And so I think that was really, again, that advice that I got from my dad was really amazing and really helpful. And it felt like really doable. I was still able to pursue my dream and not give up on sort of what I had just spent 3 years really focused on learning. But I also was being realistic at the same time. And instead of spending time working at a restaurant, which I did for a little bit, and again, when you're doing it 100%, that's kind of the only option because you need that flexibility.
Right.
But instead of doing that, I was giving up on some of the flexibility to be able to kind of have that potential. And I don't love the word fallback because I it's not, you know, like it is a plan B, but a plan B I cared about just as much. And so I think that was really good advice that I got. And so because I had that as a kind of a comfort and an assurance, eventually when I was doing this show, Drunk Shakespeare, that I loved being a part of, again, I was doing it for, I think, 2 years when I met Aaron, or a year and a half. I had kind of satisfied that itch of knowing what that lifestyle was like. And I loved it for that period of time in my life. But then when I met someone that I knew I would, you know, like to build a life with, and wanted to, you know, do things like be able to go out in the evenings at, like, you know, consistently, or contribute financially to a partnership in a way that felt stable and consistent and things like that, that all became very clear to me when I met Aaron. And so Aaron has always been the most supportive partner, and still tells people that I'm an actor when I am not actively acting, and went to, you know, a million of my performances and saw the same show over and over, and encouraged me to do it for as long as I wanted, and would, you know, I know, champion me if I wanted to do it again at any point. So it was really a personal decision, where it just kind of felt right. It kind of felt like the next step in growing up a little bit, and in figuring out what was next for me in that chapter of my life. So I continued to do the show, but was definitely focused more on working full time, and working with a nonprofit organization that served under-resourced schools and youth in the arts. And so after about a year or so, when we became engaged and were kind of, you know, moving forward in that facet of our life, I decided to take a break from Drunk Shakespeare. And so just with that came kind of a backseat of, you know, no longer actively auditioning and pursuing things like that. And so it just, I think right now it's not my focal point, but there is, I mean, it's always a part of me. It's always with me, and it feels really amazing. And I feel very lucky that I have a partner who supports me in that way, where I know that we now have a daughter, and so right now that's the focal point, and those are, that's what happens. But knowing that I have that support in, like I did with my parents, that I could always, choose to, just take another turn and go back to that path that continues to be open.
Gotcha. So Aaron, you and Kelsey dated for about a year before you decided, this is kind of it. In some ways, and I'm just thinking about this now, acting is sort of the ultimate entrepreneurial venture, right? I mean, after all, what is an audition? It's trying to, in essence, get a client, right? So what was it like for you, being involved with someone who you obviously grew to care about, who was in this very sort of up and down kind of work? What was that experience like? Because it's
Yeah. I mean, I personally loved it. I think it was so cool. I mean, to be able to tell people that my wife was a professional actor, still is, in my opinion. I mean, and here's the key. Like, firstly, Kelsey underplays it, but she wasn't an off-Broadway show. She was making money pursuing her craft and passion, and not just like, she was making more than pennies. She was making enough to live on her own, and she also was working part-time when I met her, so she was pretty much self-sufficient. So me meeting her was just like, I got to have this really cool girlfriend I would brag all the time about, who took care of herself while also being entrepreneurial. So it never in our relationship did it ever dawn on either of us that, I was going to have to support her dream because she was already doing it. And so I just got to fly in the coattails of that and just be like, yeah, she's doing awesome. But I think for kind of our relationship and everything, it really, it boiled down to, both of us being able to pursue our dream and supporting each other doing that. I think, Kelsey's pivot, she kind of touched on it, but, we have a daughter now. We have, I don't want to say a stable life, not a boring life. We do a lot of fun, interesting things, but, I forgot if I said this in the previous show, but, I had a passion for cooking as well. And I almost considered pursuing a culinary career. One of my best friends ultimately did that. And, he worked his way up, became a chef de cuisine, and then I think when he turned about around 30, he went back to school to get his degree in accounting, because there is something to be said. Yeah, because it's a hard lifestyle. Acting, anything in hospitality, it's not a 9 to 5. You're going to miss big things. You're going to miss birthdays. You're going to miss opportunities to be with your family. And firstly, we had a good balance at the get-go, and even now, if Kelsey found an opportunity, we would figure out a way to have that balance. But it is hard. It's very hard to be able to do all of that, and to also have a normal 9 to 5 lifestyle, I guess you could call it. So I think that's kind of where one of the big pivots came from, which was, what do we as a couple ultimately care about? And starting a family together was very important for us, and that kind of meant both of us had to make certain sacrifices to be around for who eventually was our daughter. But in that regards, that was I would say a very big impetus. And that's not to say actors can't have kids; many do. It's just that it's that much harder to be able to do all that.
So when you're in, more of the sort of, corporate world, I use that somewhat in quotes, but it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is somewhat of an expectation that you're going to have your, plus one with you at certain times, right? And it, with Kelsey doing shows in the evening and such, that probably wasn't always the case. So how did you navigate, situations like that, as you developed, your career, Aaron?
So ironically, I'd say, at least my experience with networking and my corporate experience, I don't think I've honestly ever been to a corporate function or networking event where plus ones were actually invited. or
Oh,
even encouraged to come. And I think honestly that just comes down to corporate budgeting, to be honest, more than anything else. But I mean, first and foremost, if there were something like that, I'll say from a personal perspective, I mean, all my friends had corporate jobs. Kelsey was definitely an outlier in regards to being an arts individual. So I'll just kind of pivot to that question, saying, well, as opposed to networking and building my career, what did I tell my friends? And two things. Firstly, they all thought what Kelsey did was remarkable and really cool. And secondly, I brought a bunch of people to her show. Actually, this is ironic. So talking about corporate and networking, I actually took my networking group to a private showing of Drunk Shakespeare.
oh,
So
A holiday
yeah, a
event.
holiday event. That was
Yeah.
our holiday event. So, kind of marrying those two worlds and, advocating for what Kelsey does and showing her off, frankly,
Mhm.
is really what it is. And I mean, twofold. Firstly, I think conformity is dangerous and boring, to be honest. And so if myself or my partner is doing something that is unusual or interesting and that's a negative for you, I don't care. I don't want to do business with you then. If you're going to judge me based on the fact that my wife's being really cool and acting, firstly, that's a very weird judgment. And secondly, if that's your mentality, like I can't imagine you actually being successful.
Yeah.
Because a part of building yourself and your business is being unique. You know, I'll never forget when my partner and I purchased our firm. We were going under underwriting, and one of the underwriters at the lender made a comment to our banker that we were working with, and the banker related to us, saying, "Yeah, why do these two guys that have very cushy positions, that high-paying jobs, why do they want to quit and take a third of their salary?" And I'm just like, that you're meant to be in a cubicle the rest of your life. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's going to be as narrow-minded as you're looking at, then you're not going to be a business owner. You're not going to be, someone that can see amazing things and admire it and appreciate it. If it doesn't fit your cookie cutter, lifestyle, then that's the lifestyle you're going to have, and that's not, worth me investing my time and energy into.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, Kelsey, now let's pick back up on your story. You're also getting involved in nonprofit work,
Right.
and you said that was an equal passion to your desire to perform. So, talk to us, if you would, about that, and maybe a little bit about what is it like to have a dueling passion like that.
Yeah.
Because I can see some similarities depending on where you are in the nonprofit world, but also they can be very, very different. So,
Sure. Yeah, I think for me it was finding like where I could bring that experience in the arts, that aliveness I felt as a kid being part of the arts, and being connected to that in a way that felt, while I wouldn't be performing or exercising my craft, I would be part of bringing that to other young people, and part of like a world where, similar to my experience in grad school or being part of a cast, or just being with other artists, being part of a group of people who care enough about this, that kind of binds them and brings them together, because nonprofit work is also not the most lucrative, but it is more stable, I will say that, more consistent, and feels a little more like a normal job, but definitely not, it's not like I am in it for the money, but it felt like a way to find a balance between that passion and that being part of doing good or bringing good, or being part of a mission, and then also having a life that felt a little more conducive with where my life was headed.
mm-hmm.
So again, that started at more like a part-time capacity, and I was also living in Manhattan, where this was a not as niche as it is in other communities, as even in Austin, Texas. There are a lot of arts-focused organizations that are heavily funded and very, well attended and very supported, because it's a need, and it's also, it's such a heavily unequitable system, especially in Manhattan. And so there are a lot of organizations really focused on bringing that equity in the art space. And so I was able to kind of get my feet wet with that and work with specific school programs, theater programs in schools in like the Brooklyn area. And then again, when I met Aaron and I was kind of pivoting in that way, I moved to a full-time position with an organization that was really focused on, building out extensive programs after school and in-school programs in all diverse facets of the art. So it was not just theater focused, but also music and dance and digital media. And it was also for me, I was on a kind of different timeline. I was experiencing what maybe people experience when they're newly out of college, where I felt like, really like I was doing it. I was, I was working with a real company and I had benefits and health insurance and paid time off. And I was part of a real team and an email account, all these, big girl things, where I was kind of catching up a little bit later. And it felt really good. It felt really, where theater was exciting in other ways. This was exciting to feel like I'm making this happen and I'm able to rely on myself in ways that I wasn't able to before. Everything felt a little more up in the air. So that was really exciting. And I also got to build out programs that I cared very much about. And this specific organization I worked with companies like Facebook and Google to provide corporate mentorships to the young people. So I was able to work directly with these partners in building out these programs. So it was very unique and felt like being part of something important. And so that was my entry into this, and I was there for 3 years. And so I think because of the nature of that role, my passion for it really grew. And again, they were never equal passions, but I knew that this was something I could do if it wasn't going to be performing. So that's sort of how I got on that path. And I'm now, again, the circumstances of life kind of sometimes shift what you're doing, and then that surprises you, and then that might take you in a different direction. And so now working in Austin, I'm working with an organization that is more STEM focused. So, and again, a sentence I never thought I would even say, but we're very similar, providing programming and opportunity for under-resourced communities, specifically for girls in STEM who are highly underrepresented in the field of STEM still, especially girls of color. And so being part of that mission and that, that area of passion has been really eye-opening, and I've been learning a lot, but also able to bring sort of my experience in the nonprofit education administrative world to that. So yeah, it's definitely been a windy path, but I was also able to do that, and I'm now doing that because I have a partner who agreed to take another leap with me and move to Austin, where my family is. So a lot of it has been an exchange of like supporting each other's passions in different ways at different times. When I was, when we were talking about where we would move and if we would move to Austin, I think that was an opportunity for Aaron to say, well, if we're taking this leap and we're doing this together, then I'm going to take the leap, or, that was part of the discussion. The leap I want to take is, to go out on my own. It feels like it's aligning, where if we're going to do this, then I'm not going to stay at my, W-2 job. I'm going to, this is the time we're kind of just going to take these risks all at once and see what sticks. So that kind of like negotiation of supporting each other and risk taking has been a constant theme for us. And so that's where it all kind of has fallen into that place where this is where I am now, where I get the opportunity to really focus on our daughter while still having a career and a purpose that is important to me. And Aaron has the opportunity to pursue a lifelong dream of owning his own business and building it out. And we get to do it in a, near my parents, which I was really hoping to be able to do, to get back home for a period of time at some point. And now we are. Yeah.
So Aaron, I mean, we talked about, your transition from, to use Kelsey's phrase, W-2 work to starting your business. What was it like going to your wife, right? Who went from a path of, shall we say, kind of lesser stability to more stability, right? And is going further on that path and basically saying, hey, I want to go in the other direction.
Yeah, I was like, it's great. You have health insurance now, so I'm going to quit my job. That's exactly, no. I think it was just kind of a gradual progression. It's always been an itch I wanted to scratch. And so, Kelsey, for the longest time, has known that, this is something that I've been interested in doing. And I think also, for me, my biggest concern was, can I do it? And I kind of had an opportunity to dip my toe in the water doing, some smaller tax returns on the side. So, I did that with my business partner, and we learned, we can service the work. I learned that I'm good at talking to people, and so I can close the business. So and we also found a firm to acquire. So I think for my wife, it was a little bit of an easier sell than just saying, hey, I'm going to go into a field that I have no experience in, and we're going to be at $0 coming in. Although we did talk about that. If, we talked about just starting my own practice, not acquiring this practice that kind of happened upon us. And, Kelsey was all about it. And at that point, we didn't have our daughter or anything like that. So we had the ability to be a little more risk taking. I think everything happened in a sequence that worked really well. Because again, if, two things. Firstly, if Kelsey was like, please don't do this, I would still be in my previous job, or I would be somewhere else as a W-2 employee. So I absolutely needed her to buy in and support me in this. But also, if we had a daughter, I would be that much more concerned about taking the risk. All that being said, when we did quit our jobs, my partner and I quit our jobs, he became a father in that December, and I became a father in that April. And Kelsey and I just bought our first house. So in the span of 6 months, we closed on our house. I quit my job, and we had our daughter. So it was terrifying.
Intense. Yeah.
Terrifying. And I was just scared. Like, I was scared. I was terrified because I'm like, I need to make money. I need to provide for my family. And it was kind of twofold. Firstly, we did it, thank God. But also, like, the motivation was there. I think my hardest adjustment, and this is why having my wife and daughter do this with me as opposed to being a solopreneur and doing it alone, was the fact that they reminded me I have a life away from work. Because even when I met Kelsey, I was, even now I work very hard, but if I didn't have them here to be like, hey, don't forget about other things other than showing up at the office, I could see myself just working too much in an unhealthy way. And even my first year with the firm, Kelsey would look at me and be like, what's wrong? And I just had that 10,000 foot stare or whatever,
staring into the abyss.
And in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I got 50 emails I got to answer, and what order I'm going to do it in. I've gotten a lot better at being present and trying to turn that off, and that's all just been an adjustment. And having Kelsey and having my wife and my daughter to be like, hey, we're here, give us attention, we're warrantable for it. It helped me rebuild that bridge, because I already had the work-life blend from the corporate job where you're always checking your corporate email, even when you clock out on as a W-2 employee. When
Right.
you're on your own, you're like, I'm working 24/7. And I learned to give myself grace and learned to give myself, hey, you're a human. People don't expect you to reply in 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, some urgent matters happen, and those, we've been on vacations and I've had to take calls and things like that always happen. But I learned not everything's an emergency, to be more present, and also we had the opportunity to build out a team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gotten a lot better. But I think going back to your initial question of selling Kelsey on it, she gave me the confidence to believe in myself that I could do it myself. Because if she didn't, I wouldn't have done it. Period.
So this is kind of a question, not kind of. This is a question I think for both of you, and it's maybe kind of going back a little bit, but how much of this or how much of these kinds of issues did you explore before you got married?
That's a good question. I think to a degree, my kind of like non-traditional path and lifestyle, at least in the context of Aaron's world, was like an entry point for that. So we were definitely exploring things like, I think you touched on this and you answered really well, Aaron. But I will also add that like at the beginning, on my end, it was definitely challenging sometimes to feel like the luxury of time that you have when you have kind of a fixed schedule. So even just like getting to know each other and dating and sort of exploring where that was going was sometimes challenging, because if Aaron wanted, to take a trip with his friends or go down to his parents for a weekend, it felt like always a very stressful thing to figure out, like this puzzle piece of like, I have a show, how can I make that work? Or it didn't feel like, it was, it often kind of was,
It was, I don't want to say ships in a night, but it was just two very different schedules.
yeah, exactly. And it just didn't feel often supported by my lifestyle and the work that I was doing. So I think in some ways that kind of came full circle now, because we have been there before where, Aaron's, I think, schedule and work is more consistent, and even still. But as a business owner, things come up, things, that you can't predict and can't control. And so similarly to, what we kind of dealt with at the beginning, and maybe didn't necessarily talk it through or think about it, but have just experienced it as a couple, we're sometimes back there where, I now maybe have more of a, consistent, predictable sense of what my timing is and what I'm able to do. And Aaron has to now kind of juggle that more, and figure out, how to be, like he said, present and with us, but also dealing with these things that come up, and fires that, only he can put out. So I think that kind of primed us a little bit for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we talked about other things, or I don't know if we did. I think it was always very clearly communicated for both of us that we both have passions and things we want to explore in our life that may require the other to be open to a less traditional lifestyle or supporting the other in that way. And I think because we've given each other that from the very beginning, that continues to be an option, that continues to be available to each other. So, oftentimes when I'm thinking about what's next for me, or if there's a different path that I want to approach yet again, Aaron is the first to say, you go for it.
Yeah.
You're when I feel like I'm too old, or we're now, past that place where I can just shift gears and try something different. Aaron is the first to say, yeah, you want to consider going back to school? Absolutely, look into it. We'll figure out how we can make that work. And similarly, I know if Aaron one day said, I want to go to culinary school and open a business or pursue comedy or something crazy like that, I may be shocked for a second and a little terrified about what that means financially. But I think I come from a background of, believing in people who believed in my dreams, and being encouraged to believe in my own dreams. And I think Aaron has always done that for me. And I want to do that for him. So because of that, even if we're not prepared, when those things come up, I think we're able to figure it out.
So you have a daughter now. I'm not going to ask you if there are more children on the horizon. If you don't mind, what I'd like to ask you is, will you do your best to instill in her the I don't know, values, if you will, that you both have exhibited toward each other, and if so, how would you do that? Right? I'll just let me set the background for the question just for a moment. To a certain extent, I don't mean this in terms of the cultural context, but you guys have like a 50s TV marriage, right? I mean, from the outside, it looks like you're able to work through conflict, and like you were saying, Kelsey, I might be shocked for a moment, but then I bounce back and we figure it out, right? I mean, ideally, that's what we would all want in a marital partner. Okay, everybody gets shocked once in a while, but what we want is someone to respond to us with understanding, and at least with an open ear and an open mind, right? And with due respect, I'm sure you've had your conflict. Every marriage does, right?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that, so I don't want to paint like the rosiest picture. We support each other, we believe in each other. I definitely don't always respond, beautifully.
It takes there's a process.
And there have been a lot of, hard conversations and negotiations and, expectations that we have to talk through. And I have to be, open my mind, and Aaron has to open his. It's hard a lot of the time, but I just wanted to add that because I do think we're able to come back to that kind of understanding that we've built, but there's things that get in the way for sure.
Just because we made it through 50 minutes of the show without an argument doesn't mean we don't get an argument.
So then this I'll take you back to the first part of this, which is, presumably you would like this to these values to be taken on board by your daughter. How do you think you'll do that? Because look, a successful marriage, in my opinion, a successful marriage is not a marriage that has no arguing. A successful marriage is a marriage that successfully navigates conflict, and keeps the partners united, loving, etc. Right? So, how would you, or how are you maybe pursuing that already? I'm not sure how old your daughter is. So
she's going to be 2 in April.
Yeah.
So she's still pretty young for us. I mean, we're trying to teach her, no means no, and like put that down or what have you.
Right.
I mean, aside from, actual specific lessons, I mean, leading by example. I mean, if you just look at her 2 parents, you have a mother that has a very passionate love for something and truly sought after it, and eventually will potentially pick it back up again, and a partner who's going to support her in that. I think she's going to look and see that she has, 2 parents that bought into each other, and that's the most important part. And also understanding that, both of her parents took what I would consider to be calculated risks. We didn't burn our ships behind us like Cortez did when they came to the Americas. We didn't, we didn't do something without a backup plan or a side hustle. Kelsey pursued acting full time and still got a part-time job in nonprofit, which evolved into her career now. Myself, again, I didn't just say, hey, I'm going to just quit and do something totally outside of my realm of understanding with no revenue coming in. I'm going to build off of whatever I build professionally. And again, I don't want either of us to stop where we are now. I think my whole approach to all of this is that life is an adventure. That's why I was open to leaving New York, because if you don't like it, you can always go back. You can go do whatever you were doing, but I don't want to, ever look back and regret a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And with our daughter Hazel, she's going to look at her two parents and say, my boring dad became a business owner, and my awesome mom continued to be awesome, but pivoted from a very non-conforming career to a more conforming one, and it wasn't a light switch. None of this stuff, and I think that's the big thing, at least for our path with this, which was none of this was 0 to 60 or 60 to 0. It was always a gradual up and down. And so, we didn't jump into the water. Some people maybe need that, but I just feel like there's, a big emphasis on, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you need to do all of it. And, and yes, you got to commit everything you got to it, but you don't have to start at 0. You can build something small and then ease into it. And that's kind of what's worked for us. And with Hazel, I want her to see her two parents that have, wholeheartedly bought into each other's dreams. And
that will buy into hers.
Yeah. And buy into hers and learn that, hey, it's good to have, to pursue things that are not, traditional, but also have a backup plan just in case, and to learn to be self-sufficient.
Yeah, and I think it just bears repeating, like Aaron was getting at, that it's okay to change your mind, that it's okay to try again or try different things, or I think often there's this pressure to know what you want to do, what you want to be, and go down a path, or that once you're down that path, you're on the path, and it's it's too expensive or too hard to get on a different path. And I think because of our own experiences, we would definitely, veer away from instilling that fear of trying something for the sake of it not being realistic or not being, financially lucrative, or, I mean, my gut is saying that I would never want her to be an actor, but but I would have to support her, because that's what we've done for each other and how we got to where we are. So I think exactly what you said, Aaron. And I think most importantly, Aaron says this a lot, I think for us it's important to teach her how to get what she wants, through her actions, through her acknowledging her emotions and being true to herself, and that's not always come easy to me, and I think that's something that Aaron possesses, and I'm excited to learn more about how to instill that in her, that she can do whatever she wants, but that she has everything inside of her to be able to make it a reality. We're just here to to be along for the ride and support her how we can.
So, I mean, I'll tell you, it's very nice to hear this. So my daughter is 16. She's a sophomore in high school. And for especially the last year or two, I've been working with her, basically, as we used to say in the Navy, to give her the con. Because in about a year and a half, she'll be 18. If she wants to have control of her life, she's got it, whether I like it or not, right?
Right.
And I think that she's finding it, on the one hand, exciting, and then the other kind of frightening.
Of course,
right?
Of course.
And I probably repeated this to her more times than she wants to hear. I say to her, baby, do not try and figure out the life that I want you to have for you, because that will make you unhappy. And I know that from personal, I mean, in my day, your parents had very strong expectations of what you were going to do. I mean, I was going to college, I was going to be a professional, and being Jewish, I was going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant.
Or an accountant.
Right.
Right. And I only got away with being, going to architecture school because my mother's father was an artist and he taught art at, Yale, kind of thing. Right. And not that, the path that I took was bad. I think I was very fortunate, and all that. But what I'm doing now is fairly different than I think what I thought I would be doing 40 years ago. So I think your message about giving your daughter a foundation that then she will build on is a very important aspect of this, and it's good to see the two of you united in that. If you won't mind an old guy saying that to you, it's actually quite heartening. You probably know this, but you two share some very, very common values. You both care about people deeply. And I think that's true of all good performers care about people, because that's what performing is, right? It's impacting people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where I see the connection between that and nonprofit work is generally about impacting people. But I think Aaron, for all of his success as an entrepreneur, from our previous show, it was really about having a bigger impact on the people he was working with, and a more direct impact. And that's really what motivates him. So I know we have a hard stop in about 2 minutes here. So I'm going to have to wrap things up, but I thank you both for coming on today. The conversation was extremely enjoyable. I really appreciate it. It was great that you would share so openly with us, about this journey that you've taken, and hopefully we can, check in, maybe, a year down the road, and
maybe have Hazel join us too.
Yeah, that'd be great. I by the way, I have to tell you, I love the name Hazel.
Thank you.
it's a great. I mean, to me, Hazel, of course, is the maid from the show. But,
I never heard of that show before.
Right? Yeah. So if you talk to my daughter, she's seen all the episodes of the show, and she loves you. We used to say everybody wants a Hazel. This person in your house is just going to take care of you. So, but Kelsey, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to take just a minute to wrap things up here, and then we'll go off. We'll go offline.
Thank you.
So okay if Kelsey ducks out now.
I'm going to duck into a meeting.
He's got to go.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. So thank you all very much for joining us. I hope that the show lived up to how I've been hyping it all week long. It certainly did from my perspective, but it's really, we hear a lot today about the challenges of marriage and all that kind of stuff. I think, Kelsey and Aaron are a fantastic example of how two people can navigate life together in a mutually supportive way. And despite the vicissitudes and the misunderstandings and such, really come together to create that, to create one life. And so I that's the message that I take away from this, and I'm sure there's lots of others. So this wraps up our shows for the week. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll be back next week, Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time with Trust and Estates Weekly. Tuesday will be the next edition. Next week, my guest, I think, is Michael Zwick on Trust and Estates Weekly. He finds heirs. He's like a private detective for people who are lost, and they're usually really happy to see him because it means they've inherited something. And on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, the next edition of Business Lessons from the Military. And then 7 days from today, we'll be back for the next edition of People Making Money. So thank you all very much for watching and wishing you a wonderful rest of the day and a terrific rest of the week. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Signing off, as I always do. Belle, all of a sudden, Marie, you are my Belle, darling. Take care, folks.